In early April of 1945, the British troops of the 49th West Riding Division received orders to assemble at the Dutch town of Westervoort, preparatory to carrying out an offensive aimed at capturing the city of Arnhem. Codenamed Operation Anger, this offensive was to be led by the 2nd Battalion of the Gloucestershire Regiment, who were tasked with assaulting across the River Isle and establishing a bridgehead on the far bank. Once this was achieved, the 2nd Battalion of the South Wales Borderers and the 2nd Battalion of the Essex Regiment would pass through and capture Arnhem itself, with the remainder of the division following up closely behind. Completing its assembly at Westervoort by the 10th of April, the 49th Division spent the next 2 days planning and preparing for Operation Anger, until the 12th of April when the divisional artillery, backed by fighter bombers of the Royal Air Force, began to lay down an intense bombardment against known German positions in the Arnhem area. Then, at around 2200 that day, the troops of the 2nd Gloucesters mounted up onto Buffalo amphibious vehicles and awaited the signal to begin their assault of the River Isle, with H hour set for 22:40. However, it was at 22:20 that concerning news was received from the supporting Royal Engineers, who reported that they had been unable to create gaps in the bund that bordered the river, as the explosive charges they were using were found to be faulty. Immediately, the officer in charge of the river crossing, Major Henry Stewart, rushed down to the bund to assess the situation for himself. For the following actions, Major Henry Stewart will be awarded the Military Cross, the citation for which reads, "Major Stewart went forward to recce alternative routes, but on nearing the bund came under intense shell and mortar fire. Despite this fire, and in complete disregard of his own safety, he recce'd the complete bund and then wirelessed back a message that he was going to order the Buffaloes to climb the bund and continue the assault according to schedule. Major Stewart climbed the bund and with the aid of a flash lamp directed the Buffaloes in their climb over the bund. The first Buffalo over the bund was seen by the enemy and mortar bombs rained down in the area. Quite unperturbed, Major Stewart directed 5 more craft over the bund, and then returned to his own craft, where he wirelessed information to the effect that to his knowledge at least 6 craft were continuing the assault. Thanks to the initiative shown by Major Henry Stewart, the assault crossing by the 2nd Gloucestershire Regiment got underway just before 2300 on the 12th of April. Through enemy small arms and mortar fire, the battalion reached the far bank of the Isle at around 23:15, from where it fanned out to secure its objectives. On the battalion's right, A Company stormed and secured the Scheissprung Fort, taking 60 enemy prisoners of war. At the same time, D Company swung out to the left and seized the area known as the Pielhausshire, whilst B and C Companies advanced up the centre and captured a factory and brickworks against light German resistance. With the capture of this industrial area, the Gloucesters had successfully seized their first objective line, and by 0300 on the 13th of April, the battalion held a small bridgehead on the far bank of the Isle. At that juncture, the 2nd Battalion of the South Wales Borderers deployed across the river and started to push west into the eastern suburbs of Arnhem. Here, German resistance became notably stronger as the Borderers were forced to clear out enemy machine gun and sniper nests, in addition to isolated pockets of German infantry who were hiding amongst the houses and alleyways. In one such instance, a section of British infantry were moving down a road when they became pinned down by fire from a house occupied by Germans. Recognising that this position had to be neutralised for the advance to continue, a Private Lewis Allen fixed his bayonet onto his Lee Enfield rifle and charged towards the house, an action that would see him later awarded the Military Medal. Private Allen's medal citation explains that Private Allen was a member of the leading section advancing into the city. During the early part of the morning, this section came under fire from enemy in the ground floor of a house. The section commander decided to work round towards the rear of the enemy position, but was soon pinned down by fire sweeping the street. Thereupon, Private Allen leapt to his feet, hurled a grenade in the direction of the enemy post, and dashed forward brandishing his rifle and bayonet and shouting at the enemy to surrender. His actions so unnerved the enemy that they stopped firing and gave themselves up. Despite increasing enemy opposition, the 2nd Borderers pressed on, and at 0600 it reported that it had secured the city's railway yard and was taking up defensive positions to the north. Here the battalion was subjected to a small German counterattack, which it held off with relative ease. Following this, the Borderers resumed their advance, with their forward elements reaching the city's centre by mid-morning. In the meantime, the 2nd Battalion of the Essex Regiment had also crossed over into the bridgehead and was securing the British right flank, whilst the 2nd Gloucesters moved down the left, clearing the banks of the Niederrhein. During this move, they captured the northern end of the Arnhem road bridge and found the first signs of the heavy fighting that had taken place in the city the previous September. Weapons, burnt-out vehicles and other abandoned equipment littered the area, and white crosses marked the graves of British paratroopers and German soldiers. The history of the 2nd Battalion of the Essex Regiment details that we saw the evidence of the tragedy of September of 1944, the broken guns and equipment, the little shallow slits the men had dug in a few seconds, and from which they fought for days until they died. We saw the little white crosses in corners of Dutch gardens, sometimes with a British name, often with an inscription such as 31 unknown British soldiers, and perhaps on top of the cross would be a weather-stained red beret which the Germans had placed there. The evidence of the closeness of the fighting was plain for all to see, and only a matter of yards from British graves were clusters of other white crosses with German names, who, like their British opponents, had been buried in the trenches where they died. By late morning on the 13th of April 1945, the 3 leading battalions of the 49th West Riding Division had made good progress into Arnhem, and additional units were starting to cross the River Isel to bolster their advance. Among these reinforcements were the Sherman tanks of the Canadian 11th Armoured Regiment, which deployed into the bridgehead at around 1100 and moved up to the front line to assist the British infantry. However, going into the afternoon, the advance of the 49th Division began to slow down, with the history of the 2nd Battalion of the South Wales Borderers recording. The advance through the city went on all day, and although there were not many Boche about, it was an intricate business, and control amongst all the streets and houses was difficult. By nightfall, the battalion was firmly into the centre of the city, the greater part of which was badly shattered. At dawn on the 14th of April, the Borderers completed the clearance of central Arnhem before pushing on and securing the western suburbs without incident. They were later joined in this area by the 1st Battalion of the Leicestershire Regiment and the 7th Battalion of the Duke of Wellington's Regiment, both of which crossed the Isel that morning. After concentrating in western Arnhem, the Leicesters advanced out and seized a piece of high ground known as Den Brink by 1700. Simultaneously, the Wellingtons cleared Arnhem train station before striking out to the north and establishing themselves on the edge of the Zypendale Park. It was here, on the night of the 14th, that a company of German infantry, supported by 3 tanks, unknowingly marched into the British lines and were ambushed by the men of the Wellingtons. Meanwhile, back in Arnhem, the troops of the 4th Battalion of the Lincolnshire Regiment had also deployed into the city on the morning of the 14th, with the task of seizing the area to the northeast. Led by D Company, the battalion initially made good progress, but was soon held up by heavy enemy fire from a factory just north of the railway lines. Here, the Germans had deployed 2 battalions, effectively turning the factory into a strongpoint. For much of the 14th, fierce close-quarter fighting unfolded in this area, and it wasn't until evening that the men of the Lincolns finally broke through the enemy defences and secured the factory, taking 234 German prisoners of war. Shortly afterwards, the battalion's B Company advanced out to the north and took up a defensive position that night in the vicinity of Roosendaal. The 49th Division then spent most of the 15th of April mopping up in Arnhem and consolidating its positions around the city. Then, on the 16th of April, the troops of the 2nd Essex, the 2nd South Wales Borderers, and the 2nd Gloucesters were transferred to the east with orders to clear the town of Velp. Detailing this move, the history of the 2nd Borderers recounts. The battalion was suddenly switched eastwards to clear the suburb of Velp. After a preliminary artillery bombardment, the leading companies, supported by tanks, moved into the outskirts and were amazed to be greeted by a delirious and overwhelming crowd of civilians. The few remaining Boche showed no inclination to fight, and the battalion's progress was only made difficult by the swarms of excited children, all waving flags, throwing flowers, and shouting, "Good boy, Tommy." It was truly an amazing and exhilarating experience, and one realised how great was the relief of the Dutch to be freed from their oppressors. Following the liberation of Velp, Operation Anger came to an end on the 16th of April 1945. In total, over the course of 4 days, the 49th West Riding Division had suffered 62 men killed in action and a further 134 wounded. Crucially though, the city of Arnhem had at long last been secured, and with it the way was now open for an Allied breakout into the northern and western regions of the Netherlands. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe so that you never miss one of my future videos.